Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Fallen London. Today we're going to be carrying on with the exceptional story, The Children of the Glow. At the end of the last episode we spoke to the Luminous Miss Sparks, and she told us that the avant-garde painter may in fact not be telling the truth. So let's go visit the avant-garde painter in his studio. If the accusation in the anonymous note is true, perhaps confronting him with it will force him to confess. The wealthy patroness having obligingly furnished you with his address, you head off to see the avant-garde painter at his studio. After only a few minutes' walk, you reach a modest-sized building and climb the stairs to the top floor. The door to the studio is ajar, and through the doorway you can see a sparse but richly furnished room. A few chairs, a table, a black velvet-covered daybed in the corner. Along the far wall, shelves bear neatly arranged rolls of canvases, jars of brushes, and tubes of paint. At the easel in the centre of the room sits the avant-garde painter. He has his back to you, affording you a view of the painting he is working on. A domestic scene of a white cat curled up on the lid of an upright piano. The brushwork on the cat's fur is impressively fine and detailed. You clear your throat, and the painter swivels around on his stool, a paintbrush in hand, the tip of it faintly glowing. "What ho! Come to see how the magic happens, have you?" Let's confront him. Did he really cage the idea for glow from his muse, the luminous Miss Sparks? Instead of expressing surprise at the allegation, the avant-garde painter simply sighs and rather testedly places his brush and palette down on the stool beside him. "How many times must I explain this?" he says, now giving you his full attention. "While it may be true that my montages modernes were inspired by Miss Sparks's interest in scrapbooking, which I own she does very prettily, there is a difference between the idle musings of a lady cutting out pictures from her favourite magazines and the craftsmanship and creative vision of an artist. Surely, as an art critic, you must see that. When you correct the misunderstanding, explaining that the accusation concerns the children of the glow, he is far less voluble." "Oh," he looks surprised. "Really? Well, I mean to say, but what nonsense! How? What utter humbug! Now, if you don't mind, I'll return to my work." His face screwed up in a fit of pique, the avant-garde painter swivels back around on his stool and ignores you. Well, that didn't quite go to plan, did it? We can use Miss Sparks's confession to press the avant-garde painter. Press upon him the foolishness of lying to the Unexpurgated Gazette. After recounting the conversation you have just had with the Miss Sparks, the painter's face, now a violent shade of pink, swells up like a pig's bladder about to burst. "Now look here, that's simply not—" The avant-garde painter begins to splutter his objections. "The thing is, Miss Sparks turned up at the salon one evening and offered to model for my paintings. If she has inspired me with ideas, well, was that not, if you think about it, her job as my muse?" The artist looks at you for affirmation. Upon receiving none, he appears to deflate, and now goes on to give something of a confession. "Yes, it was Miss Sparks who first began using the glowing paint. I came across her using it to paint flowers on one of her brooches. And it was also she who suggested the Children of the Glow, which was, honestly, better than my idea of calling ourselves the Jolly Luminous Lads." What a fantastic name. She perhaps also devised some clever philosophical ideas about what using the paint might mean, he acknowledges. That being said, however, it was he who turned the ideas into a proper art movement. When you ask him to explain how, His face turns pink again, with agitation. "Why, with my paintings, of course," he splutters testedly. "Is that not the principal point of an art movement, to produce art? Surely we do not yet live in a world where we consider the idea for an artwork more valuable than the work itself." He puts his brush down and stretches out his paint-smudged palms towards you. "See these hands? This is where I do my thinking. It is with these hands that I bring ideas to life." The painter suddenly clasps his hands to his face and begins to wail. You quietly exit the studio, leaving sounds of muffled sobbing behind you. Well, we can submit our second piece to the Gazette. You now know the truth about this art world scandal. So, was our anonymous correspondent telling the truth? Mr. Huffam accosts you with the question the moment you enter his office. "Do you have a scandal for me?" Without further ado, you reveal the results of your investigation. The Luminous Miss Sparks is indeed the true visionary behind the Children of the Glow. You now place your article into Mr. Huffam's outstretched hand. It contains... So we can either do a scathing rebuke of the avant-garde painter. He has behaved very badly and deserves to be publicly shamed. Or we can do a simple correction of the record about the origins of the glow. No need to go too hard on the avant-garde painter. He may have falsely claimed Miss Sparks' ideas as his own, but the paintings are his. Let's go with a simple correction. We don't need to publicly shame the man. That seems a step too far. Mr. Huffam begins reading your article aloud. "In our previous edition, we incorrectly stated that a certain avant-garde painter was the visionary behind the Children of the Glow art movement. We can now reveal the true originator and intellectual leader of the movement to be a promising young artist by the name of Miss Sparks. Miss Sparks, whose astonishing vision for the future of London art has lately captured the public's imagination, etc., etc." Mr. Huffam pauses for a moment, frowning. "Well, it lacks the frisson of controversy I was hoping for. Still, this intriguing young lady might be of interest to our readers. Who is she? What drives her? Does she have a tortured soul? Go and find out, would you?" Mr. Huffam retrieves some coins from a drawer and places them on the desk before you. Then pulls at his brass speaking horn to shout into it, "Chapman, tell Hogarth to come fetch the arts column." With his other hand, he waves you out of his office to begin your new assignment. Okay, so we can return to the Luminous Miss Sparks. Mr. Huffam has requested an additional piece, a personal profile on Miss Sparks herself. Let's pay another visit to the Unceasing Salon. We'll be occupied for some time. You return to the Unceasing Salon and request an interview with the Luminous Miss Sparks. After some demurring, Miss Sparks reiterates that she detests the limelight. She suggests that nevertheless it might be instructive for your readers to gain a deeper understanding of the glow and the philosophy behind it. "And no one could ever truly understand the art of the glow without seeing the source of its inspiration," says the Luminous Miss Sparks, before pausing to reflect for a moment. "Yes, I suppose there's nothing else for it. You had better come along with me and see it for yourself." She goes on to explain that tomorrow she is taking a short trip to the Elder Continent, the original source of her inspiration for glow. She invites you to join her, and, in the interest of gathering information for your new piece for the Gazette, you accept. Oh no, not another trip to the Elder Continent. Nothing good ever happens on the Elder Continent, that's all I'm saying. The next morning, you head down to the docks as arranged. You find Luminous Miss Sparks there supervising the loading of a large pile of trunks and bags onto a small steamship called the Z-Bird. The artist has exchanged her bohemian garb for more conservative, practical habiliments. A high-necked navy blouse, a matching skirt, and a sturdy wide-brimmed hat. Let's ask where we're going. After all, knowing that you're going to the Elder Continent, a vast and varied landmass, hardly narrows it down. We are bound for Varkas, he answers. The Mirrored City. Oh, we know that place from the Sunless Seas playthrough. Interesting. You are both standing on the steamship's narrow promenade deck as the ship pulls out from the dock. The luminous Miss Sparks leans against the railing, her eyes wistful, looking out to sea. We fought about it, you know. When he took my idea for the montages without asking me, I simply couldn't bear it. I knew I had to get away from him, from London, from everything. So I took a ship to the Elder Continent. He pauses and turns to look at you, as if now searching your face for a reaction. There I wandered listlessly from the Carnelian coast to the Mountain of Light. She smiles, her eyes aglow. Until I reached the city of Varkas, and there I found my inspiration. When you ask her what this inspiration was, she declines to tell you, promising you the answers are in Varkas. Well, let's ask about our subject's background. Mr. Huffam will expect you to include biographical details. Mr. Huffam will expect you to include biographical details in your article. You accompany the luminous Miss Sparks into a cosily lit dining cabin of the steamboat. Over hot cups of tea you encourage her to tell you about herself. But her answers are vague, and she takes every opportunity to deflect and change the subject. But upon recalling something the wealthy patroness told you, you ask her one more question. They say you're the illegitimate child of an earl. Is that true? The luminous Miss Sparks smiles a little and lowers her eyes as if embarrassed. And if it were, would it matter? Have you ever noticed how London society seems to take more interest in artists than in the art we create? It's so wrong-headed, she sighs, shaking her head, then looks at you directly. If the ancient wisdom of the Elder Continent has taught me anything, it's that we artists and our petty jealousies are utterly unimportant. It is art itself that matters. Artists are mere conduits for sharing it with the world. And let's ask about all this luggage. Why does the luminous Miss Sparks require so much of it? And what do all the bags and trunks contain? Oh heavens! This isn't all for me, she says, clasping a hand to her chest, as if shocked by the idea. I travel with very few of my belongings. You'll see what the luggage is once we get to Varkas. It'll be far easier to understand once we're there. He pats your arm gently and smiles, as if to reassure you. Well, let's take in the scenery. There's nothing more to do until you reach Varkas. The luminous Miss Sparks, having retired to her cabin, you take the opportunity to stretch your legs on the ship's promenade deck. Fortunately, the water is calm and the weather clear, affording you an ample view of the scenery. The Z-Bird weaves its way through the islands of the Undersea, passing through Shepherd's Wash. The lights of Abbey Rock are visible from the starboard deck. Meanwhile, the port side affords a view of the labyrinth of eels and the hump of Pigmote Isle. At length, the Z-Bird reaches the promised sea. There, just past the sculpted coral outcrop that marks the Fathom King's hold, the dark mass of the Elder Continent begins to take shape upon the horizon. Within this darkness, a point of light appears, growing ever larger as the Z-Bird approaches, eventually enveloping the boat and the Z around it in a haze of fog and light. It is Varkas, the Mirrored City. 5 large towers rise above the city walls like tall beacons, bathing the city in white light. Now on shore, You follow the Luminous Miss Sparks down a short dirt path and find yourself before a pair of gates, the surfaces of which are decorated with shards of broken mirror. Blue-robed guards observe your passage, their faces expressionless as they watch you stagger from the shock of light and heat. "Stunning, isn't it? Quite sublime," observes the Luminous Miss Sparks as she hoists you back upright by your arm. "Now, I will need to go off and arrange transport for my luggage. In the meantime, I suggest you go in and wander around the city. That way, you will discover what it is here that inspires me, just the way I did." And with that, Miss Sparks glides away, leaving you alone on the threshold of the mirrored city. Don't we need to trade something to get into the city of Varkas? If I remember correctly from my Sunless Seas playthrough? I guess we're ignoring that. I think it was just news. Recent news? I'm sure it's taken care of. Let's take in your surroundings. You need a moment to get a sense of this foreign city. Varkas, according to your first impressions, is a city built of stone, covered in moss and vines. Its streets are brightly lit with lamps and candles, so much so that one would expect to see deep shadows cast from its buildings. Yet curiously, there are none. When you turn your gaze up towards the city's towers, you see why. 4 of them are mounted with an enormous, multifaceted mirror. Each mirror shines beams of light from many directions onto the city below. All traces of shadow are thereby erased. To either side of you are the city walls, the interior sides which appear to be producing light of their own, although it's not clear how. Straight ahead of you, a long, straight, cobblestoned street leads into the heart of the city. Many of the city's inhabitants are there, going about their business. Most Vakassi are dressed in simple shifts or togas and wearing slippers. Not far from you, a Vakassi in a beige shift is pushing a cart piled with some manner of glowing object. A pungent smell wafts by you in her wake. So let's go and inspect those city walls. Why do they glow? You make your way towards a section of the city wall to the left of the mirrored gates. From afar, the wall's glow is an unbroken surface of pure white. As you approach, it breaks apart into patches of light. Now up close, you find a surface of mouldering grey stone covered in moss and fungus. Here and there the fungus blooms with flowers, glowing white blossoms the size of teacups, much like roses. Upon closer inspection, you notice that, unlike roses, the round edge of each petal converges to a pointed tip. You have seen this spear-like shape before on the painted shawl the Luminous Miss Sparks was wearing at the unceasing salon. We can climb a mirror tower. Soaring high above the city, the mirror-topped towers are undoubtedly the architectural highlight of Varkas. The mirror at the top of the tower is composed of many facets, each one the size of a small dinner table. The facets are pitched downward toward the city below, each one powered by a mechanical apparatus that constantly and very slightly adjusts its angle. The whirring sounds of these mechanisms combine into a sort of buzzing hum, which together with the hexagonal shape of the mirror facets gives the impression one is standing inside a giant beehive. When you move in for a closer look at the mirrors, you do not see the tower reflected back at you. Instead, the mirror shows nothing but a cloudy surface. You're about to move on to another facet of the mirror when your eye is caught by a dark, winding shape. You hear a sharp, sibilant sound, and the shape leaps at you, and you flinch back in shock. "Tamas, please step back from the mirror," There's a woman in a yellow Vakassi robe who has now appeared beside you. Her voice has an official tone, as if she has been assigned to the viewing platform to keep watch over gawping tourists. We ask our Tamasi guests to remain at the safe distance for their own safety. Without turning her head, the woman indicates with her eyes a rake-thin man dressed in rags a few yards away. He is squatting in front of a mirror facet, his lips moving, as if he were whispering to it. Oh, these mirrors are seemingly slightly evil, shall we say. Let's approach the woman who is pushing the cart. She might know more about the beautiful flowers she has in there. The woman's progress is slow enough for you to catch up with her without drawing too much attention. At a respectful distance, you glance at the glowing contents of her cart. They are flowers, pungent-smelling blooms, emitting a glow so bright it creates a halo effect of white around each petal. But there is another light source as well. A slow, pulsing shimmer in the air above the cart matches the rise and fall of the woman's chest. Her breathing is glowing. A voice hails you from behind. It is a fellow passenger from the Z-Bird. Are you enjoying Varkas so far? Hot enough for you? He says, fanning his tomato-red face with a slim volume of some sort of guidebook. Poor wretches, these fungus carters, he continues, his eyes following the woman as she rattles away down the street with her cart. They become terribly ill. It's the dust from those lovely blossoms they cart around, gets into their lungs and wreaks havoc. Makes one appreciate our good old London smog, eh? Oh yes, totally. Let's go rejoin the Luminous Miss Sparks. She is waiting for you beside the mirrored gate. The Luminous Miss Sparks is waiting for you at the mirrored gates. Beside her stand half a dozen fungus carters. She appears to have convinced them to fill their carts with her luggage instead of fungus flowers. Did you have a look around? You see now why you had to witness Varkas for yourself? Some Londoners find the heat and light difficult to acclimatise to, but I'm quite used to it myself. I spent time living with an aunt who keeps her parlour lit with so many gas lamps, one may as well be here in Varkas. She smiles at the recollection, before frowning disapprovedly at a pair of travellers passing through the gates behind you. Tourists see all this beauty and assume life here is idyllic, but there is a good deal of injustice in Varkas, and some Varkesi are fighting to change that. We are going to see them now. After this intriguing pronouncement, the Luminous Miss Sparks leads you off down one of the cobblestone streets, into the heart of the city. A little entourage of Vakassi fungus carters following close behind. The Luminous Miss Sparks leads you and the luggage carters down a quiet side street and through the entrance of what looks like one of the grander houses in Varkas. A servant welcomes you all into a central space lit by a large rectangular skylight. Unlike the unceasing salon in London with its carpets and cushions, this stone floor room is furnished with mats woven from vines and reed-like plants standing in stone basins of water. On a square formation of ornately carved stone benches, half a dozen young men and women sit beneath and around the skylight. They wear the Varkassi garb of slippers and loose, draped garments, decorated with beads and jewels. A man wearing a headdress resembling some manner of turban approaches, smiling. Mahas, your visit has been eagerly awaited. How honoured we are to once again be graced with your esteemed presence. Once you and the Luminous Miss Sparks are seated on an empty bench, a servant comes to serve you mugs of chilled wine. Meanwhile, the jewel-turbaned dissident has ordered servants to bring in Miss Sparks's trunks and bags, which they deposit on the floor nearby. His Varkesi guests, though exquisitely well-mannered, snatch hungry glances at this glowing pile of luggage, while you answer polite inquiries about the comfort of your Z voyage. I ask the Varkesi about themselves. It is the polite thing to do when meeting new people. We are Varkesi, with a common interest in fables in the world beyond Mihir's light, the jeweled turban dissident replies. The luminous Miss Sparks nods vigorously, then turns to you to explain. The laws here are terribly oppressive. These Varkesi are very brave. They are compelled to gather in secret, away from their families. A young woman in a pink toga-like dress and a pearl choker clears her throat to speak. You have a story for us? She asks, before drawing back, as if a little ashamed of herself. She turns to Miss Sparks with a look of appeal. Miss Sparks smiles and says, I imagine my friend here has many stories, for they are a writer. This elicits gasps of enthusiasm from some of the guests. Perhaps we might ask them to tell you the story they are working on now. Can I ask about the luggage? The Varkesi friends clearly think it contains something interesting. Ah yes, my gifts. I almost forgot. Luminous Miss Sparks gets up from her stool to approach the luggage. Within moments, she has unfastened 6 trunks and 2 bags to reveal a small library of closely packed books. You recognize some of the titles, among them Vanity Fair by Thackeray, Daniel Defoe's Moll Flanders, and the complete works of Aphra Behn. After a nod from the jewel turban dissident, the Varkesi youth rush down onto the floor and set upon the books like lion cubs on a wounded steer. Wonderful, is it not? The luminous Miss Sparks watches on with a wistful smile. I cannot imagine what it must be like to grow up without stories. Without stories, how can we learn of all the ways our lives might be different? How they could be better? I only hope that in some small way the books I bring will inspire my friends in their struggle for change. Okay, so I've got a choice of 3 stories, I think. I can tell the story that emphasizes Miss Sparks' journey from muse to artist. It's a tale of talent that was once overlooked and exploited, but now has a chance to shine. I can tell a story that focuses on her artistic inspiration and philosophy. It's a story of an artist who found her inspiration in the natural beauty of the Elder Continent. Or I can tell a version of Miss Sparks' story that paints her as a clever pragmatist. Miss Sparks found success by exploiting London's thirst for novelty and light. Let's go with this one. From muse to artist. The guests pull their stools closer and lean in, eager to hear the story you are writing for the Gazette. You begin by recounting how the luminous Miss Sparks came up with the idea for a new art style inspired by the glowing light of Varkas. You go on to explain how an artist, her lover, falsely took credit for her ideas, but that she did not protest, being a modest, publicly shy person who values art above all else. And now that she has been rightfully credited as the originator of the art movement, her singular goal is to inspire London artists to create work that is truly native to the Neath. Reaction to this summary of your Gazette's article, which, while it promises to be very readable, is hardly the stuff of Shakespearean drama, is remarkable. With tears in their eyes, their breathing feverish, the Varkesi are visibly excited. Thank you for sharing your story with us, says the jeweled turbaned dissident. I think we all rather enjoyed it rather more than we were expecting, he adds mysteriously. In fact, once we are finished here, I would very much like to take you to meet some people that I suspect you will have much in common with. How intriguing! Of course, we would be delighted, Miss Sparks replies on your behalf. Let's inquire about the restrictive laws of Varkas. What are these restrictions that the Varkesi languish under? What manner of liberties would these rebels like to enjoy? Citizens of Varkas are not permitted to travel, the Luminous Miss Sparks informs you. It is most unfair. It is, adds the jeweled turbaned dissident. It means the only knowledge we have of the world beyond Varkas is from Tamas, such as yourself. Tamas is what Vakesi call outsiders, Miss Sparks clarifies. Would you tell us, the pink-togered woman speaks quietly, as if she fears being overheard, are young Londoners compelled by law to learn the same trade as their parents? Although the woman has addressed the question to you, it is the Luminous Miss Sparks who gives the answer. No, while our parents often disapprove of our choice of profession, they cannot by law compel us. A young man in a gold-trimmed cummerbund inches forward on his stool and blurts, I'd like to become a stone carver, but I'm destined to become a priest. The Luminous Miss Sparks exhales a sympathetic sigh and shakes her head. But the cruelest law of all, the jeweled, turbaned dissident pauses, trembling with emotion. The cruelest law says we cannot lie. The Luminous Miss Sparks interjects once more. It means they can't tell stories, fictional stories. The Anakhatori believe that any form of lie can weaken the borders of reality and remove us from Mihir's light. Indeed, that's what our rulers tell us, the pink-togered woman adds. There's a murmur of uneasy agreement. And the final thing here is to follow the jeweled turban dissident. He wishes to take you to meet people he thinks you have much in common with, but I think this is where I'm going to end this episode, so thank you all very much for watching. In the next episode we will follow the man, meet these new people. It should be interesting. But please like, subscribe, let me know what you think. Your comments are greatly appreciated. It really does help spread these videos around by liking and commenting and things. It really does mean the world to me. Become a member. Thank you to the members already. Greatly appreciated. Helps keep the channel going. But as always, I'll see you next time.